Hey guys, Carl from Purple Misplaced. 2023 was an amazing year for games and for myself as well in the gaming world. According to BG Stats, I played 116 unique games in 2023, 94 of which were new to me, and that's not including some prototypes that I didn't add in there, as well as some games that I may have played once or twice and forgot to log as well. In addition, 2023 was my return back to the world of gaming conventions, finally making it to PAX Unplugged, this being my first convention since 1995 when I went to Origins when it was in Philadelphia at that same location. Had a blast at PAX Unplugged. Met lots of great people, saw a lot of great upcoming games. But now I'm reflecting back on 2023, taking that listing of new to me games, not necessarily new in 2023, but new to me games that I played for the first time in 2023, of course many of which did come out this past year. And looking at them, removing games that I had only played on VGA, removing games that were only multiplayer games, and removing some things like expansions or upcoming Kickstarter previews that I did, I ended up with about 50 to 60 games that I did put into PubMeeple, which I did my ranking in, and from there I've come up with my top 10 list of games that were new to me in 2023. Now before I get into the list, I just want to add a little bit of a disclaimer here because I am somebody who really doesn't like ranking games because my biggest sort of enjoyment in this hobby is finding new games, trying out new mechanisms, playing with new systems, and just learning and loving new games in general. So from day to day or from week to week, my idea of what game is better than another game is going to completely change, and also based on what kind of game I'm interested in playing at the moment and just whims of fancy, that ranking might change. In fact, as I was doing this list, I was sort of ranking things higher and lower even while I was ranking them. And it's even possible that since making this list, my idea of this list has sort of adjusted. So while these games are maybe not in the right order, they are still my top 10 or should be some of my top favorite games from 2023 that I did get to play. So think of these as 10 great games that I introduced myself to in this year, and the order is kind of important, but not completely. With all that said, let's go ahead and get into the list. All right, starting off at number 10, this is a game that when I first heard about it, had me immediately intrigued, but also sort of somewhat confused because it was a strange twist combination kind of thing. I am a player who really does enjoy spelling and word type games. I've always loved spelling throughout my life, as strange as that might sound. I've played a whole lot of Scrabble and a whole lot of other word games. But here we had a word game that was real time, and real time can be somewhat hit or miss for me. But this was a real time cooperative word building kind of game. And I thought, I wonder how this works solo. So I dove in, and that game is Illiterati, my number 10 for 2023. This game was a huge surprise and a very big hit for me. I just love the way that every round you're pulling out letter tiles from a bag, trying to form words with those letter tiles, doing your best not to have any letters that don't fit into words in a short time limit every round. And then adding on top of that specific sort of categories of words that you're trying to form or specific lengths of words that you're trying to form, and then trying to make sure you're using certain letters of different colors at the same time to match these goals that you're trying to score by the end of the game. And then, if that's not enough, adding in sort of bad guys that are coming out and sort of pulling out letters or tweaking things or adding new restrictions to the spelling as you're going along. I've had a whole lot of fun with this game, and this may end up being my favorite word game, or at least one of my top few word games that I play moving forward. Number 9 is another cooperative game that can be played solo, but here we're looking at the sort of pandemic stopping threats or sort of holding threats at bay kind of a game. And this is a game that I've been hearing a whole lot of hype about for quite some time, and I was really excited to finally get a chance to play it, and that game is The Loop. This game is a great twist on the pandemic sort of system, and I think this may be my favorite of that kind of sort of threat manipulation or threat management kind of games. In this game, you're playing as a series of characters, all with unique abilities, trying to hold off the evil Dr. Foe as you're fighting sort of his clones that are coming out and attacking or filling up the board. and this sort of tower, which is a unique mechanism in the game that drops cubes in 3 different directions. And every sort of turn, you're turning that in a different direction, dropping cubes, and those cubes are the sort of diseases from Pandemic that you're trying to clear from the board. But at the same time, you're trying to remove those clones. You're also using a very unique deck building mechanism. Adding deck building to a game like Pandemic for me was a whole lot of fun. Every turn adding cards into your player's sort of hand of cards or deck of cards, having 3 of them every round to sort of use as different abilities, and then making use of this interesting energy mechanic called the loop mechanic, where you can refresh cards of a certain type or of matching type by spending energy that might happen to be in your space. So you've got this sort of using unique abilities in a deck that you're building, not only unique for the character you're playing, but based on the cards you've added to that deck, trying to hold off the threat of these cubes piling up, because those are destroying sectors, and each sector you're in has a unique different mission that you're trying to score, trying to clear off certain things, add certain things, move certain things to certain locations on the board. I've had a whole lot of fun with this one, and not only that, in addition to the game being great, the solo mode in this is really unique because instead of playing multiple characters, there's this very cool solo system where they add all of the cards from those characters into a single deck. And what you're doing is drawing cards from that deck, and at any point that you have 3 cards of that character or assigned to that character then becomes the active character for that turn. And it's a really cool system to turn a co-op game into a specifically solo version of that co-op game. And in addition to that, this game has multiple different ways of play in the base box. And now since loving it, I've bought the 2 expansions for it, which I haven't had a chance to try yet, but those add even more different sort of tweaks on the core mechanisms of this game. I'm enjoying this one a whole lot, and I can't wait to try out the additional content that I now have for it. My next game is somewhat of a cheat, and this is simply because I squeezed this one in at the very end of the year because I was very curious to see how it would play, and I've actually only played this game once. So legitimately this could change my opinion of the game as I played, but from that first play, I am extremely excited about this, and I couldn't not put this on my list, and that is Guild Academies of Valeria, the newest game in the Valeria series, again by designer Stan Korodansky, who also did Shadow Kingdoms of Valeria. I'm a fan of his from that game, but even more so from Endless Winter, and I was really excited to try this one out because it seemed to be a sort of interesting dice placement kind of game. And what you're doing in this game is every round you're sort of taking worker placement kind of actions to draft these classroom tiles into your tableau, draft professors into sort of your employ at your guild academy, and then ultimately picking up dice that represent the students at the school. And then later on, those classroom tiles are going to allow you to place specific colored professors and dice or students, and those professors are going to sort of increase the values of those dice, and eventually when those dice get higher than a value of 6, they're going to graduate from school. And graduation means that those dice can then go out on a quest. And ultimately these quests are going to score you points and unlock prestige tiles, which are sort of like the classroom tiles, except that instead of using them to grow your students, they fit into your tableau and are going to score endgame scoring points. In addition, you're going to be placing your banners out in these sort of people in the school that are going to give you points for other things as well at the end of the game. And I keep talking about these points at the end of the game. This is a unique piece as well because, as I mentioned, you're placing the classrooms out into your tableau, and this is a very big spatial puzzle because as you're placing those classrooms out into your tableau, sometimes if the 4 of them at the intersection make a perfect circle based on a little sort of quarter circle on each of those tiles, you're going to get little mini abilities that come up when you get those. But then also based on your placement at the end of the game, many of those prestige tiles and those other endgame scoring bonuses score based on the way that your tiles are placed out, with adjacency scoring or the number of a certain type of tile or a number of those circle ability tokens that you unlocked and those kinds of things. So the placement as you're building is not just to give you the access to classrooms to make the dice get better to go on quests, but also are working towards endgame scoring based on set collection and adjacency and other kinds of spatial puzzle aspects as well. I really enjoyed my first play of this, and the sort of combination of all these mechanisms and how they all work together really made me have a whole lot of fun with this one, and I cannot wait to get this back to the table and eventually bring a video to this channel for all of you. Next up is a game that I've absolutely played a whole lot more than one time. Sorry about the last one. But this one I've played a whole lot, and that's because this game in the box has a whole wide breadth of different scenarios that you can play. Here's another one that brings in deck building in a very unique way. It's a small piece of the game, but it is also a co-op game. This is Keep the Heroes Out. Brewig Games does it again with this. First off, gorgeous design visually. The wooden components in this game, awesome. I just love to play with them from a toyetic kind of aspect as well. But this game is a whole lot of fun. This is another sort of hold off the bad guys threat management kind of system. And this is higher than the Loop. I did say the Loop might be my favorite of that type, but this one kind of pushes things a little bit more than just that, because each of these games is going to use map tiles and place them out in a different arrangement. But more importantly, as I mentioned, the game has a whole lot of scenarios. And each of those scenarios, in addition to holding off the threat, you're also working to achieve some kind of unique goal for that scenario alone. And I mentioned there's a bit of a deck building aspect in here, just like there was in the Loop. So maybe this deck building co-op kind of thing is something I'm very interested in. The deck building here is a little bit less because you are working through your deck, and each of your cards gives you unique abilities and unique things to do in the game. And the more cards you add in, the less likely you're going to see some of those other cards. So you don't really do a whole lot of that deck building, and you could sort of ignore it completely depending on the scenario you're playing. But what you're doing here is you're controlling monsters, trying to keep the heroes, the pesky heroes, from coming in and stealing your gold, meanwhile trying to solve some other goal based on the scenario that you're playing. There are a wide variety of different monster groups in this game, each of which play completely different. Some of them are very aggressive, some of them are sort of tank characters, some of them move around really fast to get a bunch of stuff done, because part of this game, in addition to fighting off the bad guys, is you need to sort of run from room to room, collecting resources, turning those resources into the cards that you're adding into your tableau, and doing a variety of different special actions depending on which scenario you're playing. I had a whole lot of fun with this one. They just recently kickstarted an expansion for this that's going to add in even more with some sort of big bosses that they add into the game, and I cannot wait to see how that plays. This game is going to be in my collection for a while. I still have about half of the scenarios to play through, and there's a bunch more that he's been releasing online during holidays and other things. I am super excited about this game, and I continue to enjoy it. I can't wait to play this some more as well. Rounding out the bottom half of this list is the first Japanese game on this list. And this is an interesting one for me because very recently I started getting into Japanese games on my channel because I did live in Japan for 6 years. I do speak Japanese, and I really want to help the viewers of this channel and just people, gamers in general, to find these sort of small Japanese games that you may never hear about. And there's lots of really cool stuff coming out of there, even in the solo market, which tends to be a little bit less in Japan. But I want to find these solo gems out of Japan and introduce them to you. And this game is one that I had a student at my school who graduated, was very big into games. I posted once about, I'm looking for Japanese solo games, and this is the very first thing she said. This was the very first Japanese solo game I'd ever heard about, or at least soloable game that I'd ever heard about. And that game is Amalfi, or in this case, Amalfi Renaissance. Amalfi is a game from a Japanese publisher called Uchibakoya, who makes amazing wooden components. They actually started off as a wooden component company first, and now they're making these wonderful games as well. And Amalfi is sort of their first big game. It's huge, well, big medium weight Euro worker placement kind of game that does some really cool things, and now it's even better. This recently got a reimagining from Silex Games, and also developed or at least published by R&R Games in the US. This takes their game and adds in even more. And what this game is a unique worker placement game where you are sort of working as merchants, trading in the Mediterranean, as you do in a lot of these Euro games. But your workers are boats, and you're placing these boats out onto locations in the world to collect resources, and you're using those resources to sort of invite nobles or important people into your social circles, trying to improve your fleet by making a bigger fleet, and trying to sort of hit these certain goal thresholds of having a certain number of people in your sort of social circle, having a lot of artwork that you've collected through these processes as well. But what makes this really unique is that your workers are also the way that you track your resources, because those boats are going to get slid up to a different location of your player board to track the amount of resources, and each of those boats will be worth a certain number of resources depending on which resource it is. So that means that every boat you place out to trigger an action to gain those resources can then later in that round not be used to actually become resources. So as the round goes on, and as you're placing more and more of your boats out on these locations, you have a sort of less and less ability to store resources or to even gain resources. And it gets to the point where you can't even place something out, because if you placed your last boat out on a location, you can't turn anything into resources because you don't have anything left. And in that situation, you can always do an emergency action to turn that last boat into something useful. But the point is, it's this really cool balancing act of where can I spend boats to go out and do things, and how many boats do I need to sort of use to hold on to convert into those resources, to then spend as resources to get artwork, to build new ships, to bring in some of these famous people, and to ultimately try and hit these scoring goals along the way. This is a whole lot of fun. I am super glad that this finally got republished in an English language version and that I finally got a chance to play it. I'm so excited to see what Uchibako has got coming soon. I know Ostia, another big Euro that they did, is coming back to Kickstarter very soon in February, and I can't wait to finally get a chance to try that one. And I know secretly, but not so secretly, they're working on their sort of Terra Mystica version, this sort of cutesy sweet-based game that's supposed to be super heavy, crunchy Euro, and I've been following that and can't wait to see more. Amalfi's a great game. Uchibako is a great company. Big recommend from me. All right, then, getting into my top 5 games. This is a game that I sort of expected to be a little bit higher on my list, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But again, I told you that my list is very fluid and very changing and so on. But this is a game that I played very late in the year, but one that I've been waiting to play for a really, really, really long time. This is a narrative campaign game that just looked really cool, and I'm glad to have finally gotten a chance to play it, and that is Isla and Something Shiny. This one did just recently get a review from me, and this is an extremely cool card-based narrative story game that's kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure with this sort of looping card system where you're adding in cards and taking out cards depending on the choices that you make along the way and depending on sort of the skill checks that you make along the way. There's a really cool story in here with some branching paths with sort of one real ending and 2 lesser endings that sort of push you to go back through, some big surprises along the way. I had a really good time with this one. I said it should be probably higher on my list, and I think the reason it's not is because I really enjoyed this experience. The first time I played through, I had a blast. This is a really cool system. The mechanisms in here are great. I got one of the lesser endings and I felt, I don't know if I made the decisions that should have led to that, or there was no way for me to have known that that was going to happen, but I pushed through because I wanted to play it again. And again, the second time through, I felt even better, had a whole lot more fun, remembered what I love so much about the mechanisms, got to the good ending, and wow, it's just a really cool story. Again, a little darker than you'd expect from the imagery here, but I have a whole lot of fun with this card system, seeing what's coming out, the surprises that come out with the cards that get added, seeing how the choices you make influence not just the game you're playing, but future games that you play in the series. Now, it probably would be a little bit higher if I hadn't played some of these other games, obviously, but this game is a one and done, well, 3 and done kind of campaign game, at least for me, so it doesn't really have legs in that way, but boy am I glad this is a game that I finally got to the table. Again, probably could be a little higher on the list, but number 5 is not a bad place to be. Isla and Something Shiny, again, huge recommendation from me. All right, so number 4 is a game that probably doesn't have the right to be in this location on my list, but I've had so much fun with this game and it couldn't not be here. This is another co-op game, but this is a sort of slow Zen-like experience based on a game. You've probably heard of it by now because it is a Spiel winner, Dorfromantik, the board game. This game at face value is a tile-laying game with almost no purpose. I mean, there is scoring goals and there are unlockables in here based on things you do in the game, but otherwise it's sort of just place down tiles to make patterns to score points. And there's no real win condition. There's no real sort of point to it except see how many points you can score and unlock the fun stuff. But boy, do I love this game, and I keep bringing it back to the table. As a reviewer, I tend to play through a game fairly quickly and throw it to the side so I can get to the next game for the next review. And this is one that just kept finding itself back on my table. It's not even one that I intended to review. It's not a review copy. It's one I just picked up to try out. And because I was playing it so much, I decided it needed a video on this channel. There's just something about, again, a tile layer spatial puzzle game is something that I really do enjoy. And this one does it wonderfully. It looks beautiful on the table. And yeah, I don't really care too much about the points, but when you give me this sort of tree of things that I can unlock by doing things and hitting achievements and hitting goals, and it's just this like video gamer need in my brain that I want to do all of those things, and I'm going to keep on playing this until I do all of those things, and I'm just going to keep churning and churning and hoping I do better. But the experience along the way is a good one. It's a fun one. It's relaxing, but also sort of brain-bendingly puzzly, and it feels really good, and that achiever in me really wants to get to all of those achievements, and you better believe I will at some point. Now, granted, once I've cleared all of those achievements, this game might slip from the list or might disappear from my collection simply because I have finished it, and then games like Isla or other games that I may have enjoyed more than this one, but this one gave me the experience that made it push up the list further than the game itself really would be if it was just about mechanisms. This one was all about experience for me, and it deserves its place at 4. The next game on my list was a bit of a surprise to me while I was going through my games to make this list, because this is something I played early in the year and remembered enjoying, and then I pulled it back again to make this list just to sort of make sure that I still felt the way that I think that I felt about this game. And it's a surprise because it's not getting all that much attention. This is not a game that I'm really seeing in many of these videos, on many of these lists, and it might just be because it was sort of lesser known. But this is a company that I absolutely love. This game is coming from a company called Final Frontier Games that have done things like Merchant's Cove and Coloma, and just all of their games for me have worked really well. And this is a publisher that I'm basically collecting what they have, what they've done. And this game is Solani. This game is one of 2 games that came out in what they called their Pillars of Creation Kickstarter campaign. The other one is The Girl Who Made the Stars, and they're both sort of a star-themed game based on some native culture's sort of mythology. But this game just can't get out of my head. It's a tile-laying puzzle kind of game made by a designer named Drake Villarreal, who happens to be a name that I've been following from this company, but from other companies as well through his work on solo modes for games, and I've really been enjoying what he's been doing in solo modes and things like Endless Winter. But here, this is a game that he's designed from the ground up himself, and I am loving this game. Basically, to put it bluntly or to put it simply, because many of you will have heard of it, Cascadia is a game where you're drafting tiles and drafting tokens and placing them out in a certain way to score based on gold cards. Well, this is sort of similar to that in that you are drafting sort of star and sort of star path tiles, and you're trying to build these sort of constellations of stars, scoring these stars based on the number of stars on a token need to match the number of pathways or the number of connections that connect into that star. And you're building out this tableau, placing out these tokens, scoring on that pathway system, but then also on goals that you have, and then also on unique tokens that need to be placed out in specific locations on your board, scoring on location and scoring on other things that you have out on your board. There are also planets that you can swap your stars for, and the planets sort of score for unique colors of planets in the 4 different quadrants of the sky. I am just really loving the unique twists that this one puts on a formula like Cascadia. I enjoy this one quite a bit more than Cascadia. This is a gorgeous game with wonderful wooden tiles, really beautiful neoprene matte player boards and game board. Everything in this box is wonderful, and you better believe that this will be getting a video on my channel. Now that I've gotten it back to the table and remembered how much I loved it, I hope to get this one up on the channel soon so all of you can see exactly how great this game is. coming in at number 2 is a game that quite literally fits into my pocket. A very, very small card game out of Japan that I recently did a video for on my channel, and that is Last Dungeon Pocket. This is a small, solo-only deck-building game in which you sort of find yourself as the lord of a dungeon, fighting off these pesky heroes. Again, just like Keep the Heroes Out earlier today. Fighting off these pesky heroes as they come into your dungeon, only this time turning them to your side and then using them to fight future heroes that are coming in, finally fighting off the legendary hero himself at the end of the sort of game, or at the end of the story, I guess. And it's all done through a really clever deck building system where you're, again, spending points to bring new heroes into your hand of cards or your deck of cards and then using them to fight off future heroes that are coming in. But those points also have to be used to sort of extend your dungeon or push back the heroes so that they don't make it to the treasure room in your dungeon. This also has a unique, semi-unique, because I saw it done in Aeon's End and recently an Astronauts system of non-shuffling deck building. So at the end, when you're done your deck, instead of shuffling and playing again, you simply flip that deck over and that is what you've got. So you've got a bit of the ability to sort of layer in the cards as you're playing them so that in the next round when they come back out in the right order so you can combo them together, putting together these strings of combos and making use of the abilities on each of these unique heroes as they're coming in and as you're making the decision whether to recruit them or use them as points to sort of recruit future things or to keep the heroes at bay in future rounds. There's a whole lot of game in this small little packet, this little box that, again, fits right into your pocket. I am very much in love with this game, and I know just at the most recent Tokyo Game Market, they made a new sort of version, an upgraded, slightly different kind of game. I believe it's called Escape the Moon. It's a sort of space-themed game that is at its core similar to this, but again, refreshed and renewed, and I cannot wait to try that one as well. But this is a big recommend. Fingers crossed that this one and or Escape the Moon make their way over here. Ju-Game, the company who makes this, has a full pocket series, and I hope to try out more of those as well. Big recommend from me if you can get your hands on this. Again, only in Japanese, but if you watch my video or if you ask for help and cross your fingers that there's an English version coming soon, big, big recommend from me. All right then, so number 1, last game on my list, best game of mine for the year 2023. This one was a big surprise for me. I'd been wanting to try it for a really long time, and boy am I glad I did. First sort of big campaign game that as a solo gamer, aside from the Pandemic Legacy series, that I as a solo gamer managed to make it through all the way to the end. A lot of these big campaign games I peter out halfway and then unfortunately get busy with other things and never come back to them. But this one, Role Player Adventures, can we get it on the screen? Huge box, huge game, lots of fun in this one, and I played every minute of this game and then started again immediately and started playing more. This was not even a review copy. Granted, I did later get the expansion as the review copy, but I got this game on my own, wanted to play it, and before I even decided to review it, played and played and played. This is one that stayed out on the table. I found a dedicated space for it and just let it be because I wanted to go through this game. This is a very cool, very somewhat light narrative campaign, choose your own adventure style game where you're doing this sort of skill check and combat system based on dice manipulation, collecting cards as items and buying cards along the way that give you unique abilities to manipulate those dice in different ways to hopefully make your sort of ability pass those checks and combat better moving forward. But more than that, again, this is a narrative first kind of game with a wonderfully written story. Choose your own adventure stuff that as you're going along, the amount of sort of adaptability or changes the game makes based on the things you've done previously in the game was amazing to me. In each scenario, you're collecting items that work in specific ways, but then throughout the campaign, you're collecting these title cards. And very often you'll go to a location that says, if you have this title, do this. And things from sort of scenario 1 and scenario 2 could have huge repercussions in scenario 6, 7, 8. Just really cool how alive this story felt, how alive this world felt. And with the expansion added in, this is the sort of first time that I've played a sort of role-playing style story narrative campaign where I was sort of controlling a character through the story, where I actually cared about the character. And more than that, I made decisions in the story based on what I thought that character would do and how that character would react and sort of what skills and ability I expected that character to have. This is the first time that I've connected with a narrative campaign in that way and didn't just play it as if I was reading a story. I had a ton of fun with this. I did just recently get the new expansion in a giveaway. Thanks, Kanji, over there at Kanji Studios, for that giveaway. I can't wait to get the new expansion and play through more of the story in this world, because not only is this game great, but this Ulos world that these guys over at Thunderworks have created continues to be interesting, continues to be something I want to play more games in, and I cannot say enough good about this game. My number one of 2023 Role Player Adventures. So that's it. Again, I played a whole lot of new games this year. There were a whole lot of great new experiences. I can't wait to share some of those games that I haven't covered yet on my channel, but more importantly, moving forward into 2024, sharing more games with you as we go along. I will have one more small top video on the channel coming soon, and that's going to be my top 5 games that I covered as sort of previews for Kickstarters or GameFounds or other crowdfunding campaigns. That video should be coming along very shortly. Keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, keep an eye out for a variety of new reviews and other videos coming from me on this channel. Thanks again always for watching what I put out. I do hope that you enjoy everything that I do, and I always thank you for all of the comments and support that you give me back on this channel. As always, if you did like this video and you do like this channel, please remember to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon below, as it does help very much with the growth of this channel, and I look forward to talking with you all soon. Thanks.